I got this one, Sandra.
Okay. Maybe I should shut up this time.
Why not?
Oh, because
It's a free country, Sandra. Your opinion is very welcome, even if it's controversial. I know mine's going to be controversial.
you know, it's a good thing you didn't tell me Sean was on the show today, because I would have brought my, those punchy things.
Hey, I got a laser pointer.
Everyone's out to get me. It hasn't even started.
Okay, Sean Dalton is here, back
Sean,
on the
we love
show.
you anyway.
And it's part 4 of
Sean is Mr. Political Passion.
Mosaic.
Canada's Broken Mosaic, the literary critics of multiculturalism. And Sean, where are we? Come on, let's go. Let's get right into it.
This is part 4. The Northern Mangus, Pierre Trudeau and the Canadians, was released by Richard Gwynne in 1981. And I've got 2 pieces of evidence here to prove that it's a political system. I already introduced another piece in a previous debate, so this will further reinforce that narrative.
Okay.
Okay, it's a very small quote from Chapter 9, Sugar Ray Robinson, page 139.
That's the name of the chapter?
That's the name of the chapter. It's a very short quote here.
All
right. So, supreme politicians, the kind who are praised by the press and re-elected by voters, are first to last wily, devious, and manipulative. They're also blatantly partisan, concerned exclusively with the advantage of the moment, prepared to use every tool and all the money in the public purse to win re-election. Harper might be trying to do that now with the attack ads against Trudeau and Mulcair. You can see how politicians use that. Trudeau, the rationalist supreme, did all these things. With a flick of the magician's wand, Trudeau's imperative post-1972 changed from doing what was right, rationally, to doing what was advantageous politically. So Trudeau had been criticized for ignoring the Queen. In 1973, the Queen came to Canada twice, a history-making precedent with Trudeau at her side every step of the royal progress. So he had been accused of sloughing off the ethnics. Up sprang a trebled multiculturalism program that functioned as a slush fund to buy ethnic votes. So that's from that book. That's one piece of evidence.
Okay.
You would think those reptilian, alien, shape-shifting hybrids would stick together.
Why do you always lean into me when you make those comments?
I don't know.
So the second piece of evidence is from a book. 1991, Zuhair Kazmari released The Gulf Within, Canadian Arabs, Racism in the Gulf War. And here's an excerpt from Chapter 12's The Crumbling Mosaic on page 126.
Sorry, what year was this out?
1991.
Okay.
Yeah. Quote, multiculturalism became official Canadian policy as part of the Trudeau government's response to the challenge of Quebec. I think you mentioned that before, Hugh, in another debate. You said multiculturalism was because of Quebec's challenge, so Trudeau implemented.
I think it was Trudeau's strategy to try to integrate the French Canada within a multiculturalism framework that would embrace.
Right. I think he could have done it in an interculturalism policy.
Well, Sean, I like this intercultural idea that you have.
So, because at least they would have focused on Canada instead of everyone else besides Canadians. The Trudeau policy to counter demands for Quebec's sovereignty was bilingualism, which, remember, only 8.5% of Canadians outside Quebec speak French as a first language. 3 provinces are French-speaking provinces. Quebec, 79%. New Brunswick, 27%. And Ontario's the 3rd largest French-speaking province at 2.2%. Every other province and territory, according to 2011 census, is under half of 1%.
Wow.
And multiculturalism for all of Canada. Multiculturalism went several steps further than the American model of the melting pot, where all newcomers were blended together, a cultural imperialism of sorts. Canada decided to support immigrants in maintaining their culture. Cynics, however, labeled the concept a ploy by the Liberal government of Pierre Trudeau, which saw the ethnics as a massive vote bank that needed to be nurtured so that the voting Liberal became a family tradition. When Brian Mulroney, who was from Quebec too, Brian Mulroney, and the Tories assumed power in September 1984, they were no different. They decided to take multiculturalism several steps further and not only pass the Canadian Multiculturalism Act, which, by the way, Stephen Harper's been slashing funding to this act severely,
Yes, and now he's bringing Dragon's Den in.
He's bringing Dragon's Den in to evaluate 200 applications for an investor entrepreneur program, and if they get accepted, they'll be fast-tracked, but it's not going to be allowed for a restaurant. It's going to have to be a factory or a technology or a pharmaceutical product, so he's going to focus on high-growth industries, which is a good thing. We've already got enough restaurants.
I feel very confident in that panel.
Well, that's why it's a pilot project, because they're not sure if it's going to work or not, so they're just trying it. It's an experiment, I guess. They decided to take multiculturalism several steps further and not only pass the Canadian Multiculturalism Act, but also set up a separate department for multiculturalism. If Pierre Trudeau would be remembered for expounding on the multicultural mosaic, the Tories figured they should be remembered for enshrining it into law. And a side note, Germany, France, the UK, Holland, and Spain declared multiculturalism a disaster, and they're going with the U.S. melting pot model.
When?
In the last 3-4 years. They've tried it. There's been another riot in France this week. There was one last week. You got enclaves of citizens who physically live in the European Republic, and they don't feel like they're part of the mainstream because state-sponsored multiculturalism encouraged them to live life in ways that are in counter to the values of the European citizens. So now they're having it's almost like a Trojan horse, pretty much. Like if I went to another country and I asked for all these demands, I'd probably get murdered. I wouldn't even ask for these demands as a citizen. I would learn the language, find out the way of life there, and try to join the rhythm of that culture and that society, because that's just what I was raised in a G8 nation. I think that's the proper thing to do. I could never imagine asking for my own school or my own language or, multiculturalism encourages these things. It encourages tribalism, it encourages segregation, it encourages you to celebrate the country where your parents came from instead of Canada.
All of which plays into the hands of the global elites who are promoting globalization.
Absolutely. It allows for corporations to have cheap labor. They used to call it clearing the decks, and they would only used to be able to do that after 20 years. Now they can do it after 2 because they flooded the country with people, and instead of paying you $14 an hour, they'll pay someone else $11 to do the same job. So it is part of the global elite's plan to...
It's the Queen's fault.
We can blame the Queen.
There's a new royal baby. Let's celebrate.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not from England, so, excuse me if I don't drink my tea and put on the, whatever. This is from, I'm going to read a little bit from Room for Us All. Surprising Stories of Loss and Transformation by Adrienne Clarkson.
Who was the...
She was the former lieutenant governor.
Lieutenant governor.
Yeah, under Jean Chrétien. And this chapter is called Exiles by Many Names. I want to share a little story about the group of people called the Doukhobors, and how if you allow people to live life in ways that they want to, how the problems that could arise when such policy is allowed.
Didn't they take off all their clothes once?
I'm going to get to that, Hugh.
Okay.
You just ruined it.
How did you know? You just ruined it.
Doukhobors refused to swear allegiance to any state authority. When 7,500 of them came to Canada in 1899, a deal was made with the Minister of Interior, Clifford Sifton, that would exempt them from military service and allow them to enjoy freedom of religion and hold their land in common in the same manner as the Mennonites had done in coming to Canada several decades before. Sifton was replaced as Minister of the Interior in 1905. His successor, Frank Oliver, dreamed of a Canadian West populated by British immigrants and warned against the prairies, the, quote, seed and cradle of the future population of the Dominion, being filled by, quote, people with different ideas, different views, who would deflect Canada from the destiny for which he felt it was intended. He moved to cancel half of the homestead holdings of the Doukhobors because they would not swear allegiance to the crown and would not take the individual title to their land. This caused rifts in the Doukhobors. Some refused to take the oath and were dispossessed, while others did take the oath in order to stay on the land. In other words, meet the state halfway, try to be a good citizen. But this was a long time ago. There was a lot more discrimination back then than there is now. Thank God for that.
Yep.
Unfortunately, many older Canadians remember only the Sons of Freedom sect of the Doukhobors, who made their headlines through the 1950s when they refused to allow their children to go to public schools. They regarded all government initiatives as an intrusion on their lives, and in protest burned their own houses, and the women took off their clothes. That's the...
Woo!
You mentioned that, so I was like...
Yeah,
But the men didn't?
I didn't say, so, but...
It wasn't illegal.
It wasn't illegal, but, it was definitely not what, the majority of citizens would do in those circumstances.
So you're giving us a ton of examples of how small minority groups are taking advantage of
State-sponsored multiculturalism.
the good nature of Canada's trying to integrate.
I don't even think we're trying to integrate people. We tell people, we didn't, up until Harper came to government, we didn't even recognize foreign credentials for the last 20 years. And it's basically created poverty for new citizens. We weren't even running it responsibly. When you don't recognize foreign credentials, you relegate citizens to poverty. And we're doing that by 250,000 people a year Like, that's a lot of
Okay,
people.
so your argument is not that they're not. It's not that the ethnic communities are taking over. It's that we didn't give them a fair chance. Or correct me if I'm wrong.
It's both.
Okay.
It's because it's a 50-50. Like, when you go to someone else's country, there's obviously going to be standards, language, cultural norms.
Right.
You know.
But don't you think? I mean, I know you want to read more, but actually, it's a really good point, because the reason, if you come here from another country and you're a doctor and you're driving a cab, right? Okay, you are going to stick to something you know. So you actually, by not allowing them to do what they did over there, by not helping to foster that, they're actually going to stick together. We're actually promoting that segregation.
The
because-
ghettoization.
Yeah.
And we're also making them angry because they feel like someone who's a doctor has a very high degree of knowledge and education. And I'll never knock, cab drivers are great people and they do a fantastic job getting the kids home from the nightclubs and bars after they close. If you're in the medical professional, you want to work in your field. You want to make as much money as possible, especially the kind of money doctors make. You want to have a good life, a family.
Yeah.
A lot of them aspire towards
So
these
if
things.
they did have that, though, Sean, if they were able to practice and come here and be a doctor, okay, maybe they'd have to upgrade or take a few tests,
just take a
whatever.
test or two, yeah.
Then become doctors. We probably wouldn't see the segregation as much,
Yeah,
would
you know
we?
what? It would probably fix a lot of the problems because they'd be economically integrated. When you're making the money you want to, generally you're happier.
Well, you also are more embracing, you're embracing other cultures, because you're now integrating with other cultures
you feel
too,
more
right?
that the society is more of a welcoming place instead of a society that says, well, we took you under a point system, but we're not going to recognize your credentials,
yeah, and we
so
don't really
go work
think
in the
you're
grocery store because, well,
Because you're feeling you're contributing.
yeah, absolutely.
You're part of the society.
Yeah, so there's the solution.
And that's what America does. America's got the, America makes people part of the next chapter. America believes in debates and controversy, and they turn it into a profit mechanism, either a book, a movie, or whatever. Like they're good at giving people the American dream, and people chase it, achieve it. Not everyone, but the people who do achieve it create wealth for other people. I mean,
Like Harold and Kumar.
or the founders of Intel or Amazon.com or Yahoo. The founders of these corporations created billions of dollars for workers, for investors, so the government can go ahead and tax them. It's not the perfect system, but it's a very good system at economically and socially integrating citizens into America. And it seems to work, for better or for worse, Love it or leave it, they say in the States, right?
But wouldn't that be? But isn't that the solution then? Isn't that the solution to the
It
problem?
is, but do you mind if I read from this book a little bit?
Go.
Okay, cool. Mirror of the Arab World, Lebanon in Conflict by Sandra Mackey in 2008. This book was released. It says here, this is Identity in Pursuit of a Nation. That's the name of the chapter. Among states that are cohesive nations, Japan embraces a people whose identity developed over many centuries on islands largely isolated from outside influences. European countries took form as nations where populations shared a common ethnicity, language, religion, history, and culture. The United States, a collection of immigrants gathered around a set of commonly respected principles fed by economic opportunity, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, of course. Today, all of these nations possess a history of at least 2 centuries, some many more. They stand in stark contrast to most Arab states, which are both contrived political creations rooted in short national histories and aged vessels holding centuries of rigid traditions. The resistance to change is universal. No person, no group, no society welcomes interruptions in their comfortable patterns of tradition, perception, and identity served up by a changing social order delivered from the outside by rival societies, alien cultures, competing economies, and advancing technology. Yet some societies, no matter how reluctantly, have proven willing to modify deeply rooted beliefs, values, and practices in order to advance economic growth and political tranquility. In contrast, most societies that are tightly bound to tradition have proved profoundly afraid to modify, alter, or recreate themselves because it is tradition which provides the anchor to which the individual has tied his or her identity for centuries. So that's, so some people are just used to a certain way of life, and no matter what you do or what you say, they're just going to live life that way anyway. And when you pick up the newspaper and you read about citizens of Canada going overseas to fight in wars in Croatia or in Somalia, you kind of shrug your shoulders like, why are they doing this? Well, it's Canada's fault for not giving them cultural capital, not sharing their history with them, not giving them anything to buy into or believe in. So some people will buy into believe in some other ideology, which could be extremism. It's not going to be that high percentage of citizens. Most people will want to be Canadian, but the question is, how many is it going to take for it to be a problem? Do we have to wait for the subways to blow up by suicide bombers? Because it went on in France, it happened in Spain. And these are things that happen in first world nations with a high degree of police force, high security level, and it still happened anyway. Their own citizens, homemade terrorists.
So you're saying this is all Canada's fault?
It's not all Canada's fault. It's a 50-50 proposition, but Canada hasn't, like I just talked to a woman yesterday. We kind of dated or whatever. Like I ran into this person, and she said, you know, she's been living here for 11 years, and she's eager to go back to China. She doesn't feel, and she's really smart. Like she's doing really well, and she's not economically destitute. She just wants to go to China and help China because she thinks it's rising to prominence. And I had a debate with her about that. I said, what about the air pollution? What about the riots? What about the lack of democracy? You know, and she acknowledged all these things, but she doesn't feel like Canada's her home, even though she's physically living here. And her daughter's going to a Canadian university.
Is her daughter going with her?
I think so, yeah. I think her daughter's probably going to go with her because, you know, they love each other a lot. But it's amazing how people can spend so much time here and then still feel allegiance to another country, even if they succeed here economically. And
Well, I think that goes without saying if you were born somewhere else. And no matter how much you are welcome and embraced here, I think that seems to be...
I think being an immigrant is a really tough.
it's got to be, you know.
You know
thing
what?
to do.
Well, I think being an immigrant is really tough, but I think actually being born here is actually tougher.
It's becoming tough. It's becoming...
I think it's actually tougher.
You start wondering if it's better to be an immigrant because all they ever talk
think
about are
yeah.
immigrants, and they almost never talk about Canadians. So
It would be nice if there was some real economic opportunity in this country. I think the government has really
Not based on
done a
whether you're a
horrible job
settlement.
of managing the country in a way that there's economic opportunity for everybody that's here.
I agree with you, Sean, on one thing, and that is that they have separated. I see so many services and billboards for new immigrants or settlement.
Yeah.
And all kinds of policies
yeah,
and all kinds of programs.
the fact is there's 1.4 million people unemployed in this whole country, and 620,000 of those unemployed people are here in Ontario. That's 44% of the overall total. So we're bringing in 100,000 people a year, and I see the condos being built all over Toronto. They're replacing the factories. They're replacing industrial land where people work. It's nice to have a place to live, but it's also nice to have a place to work too, right? I mean, I don't know. I just find that like...
No, you're right, Sean.
You know.
Okay, go. We don't have a lot of time. We've got about just a few minutes, Sean.
Okay.
Please.
Ethnic enclaves. Remember you said you don't want that happening in the last debates?
Exactly.
Okay, so...
Spreading from city into suburbs.
yeah, absolutely.
That's what it says.
So it says, the Jewish community, for example, took hold of the Bathurst corridor from Lawrence to Centre Street in Thornhill, the Chinese in Scarborough, Markham and Mississauga, Italians in Vaughan, and Indians in Brampton. Greeks on the Danforth, Italians on College Street, Chinese near Elizabeth and Hagman Streets. Like, everyone's formed an enclave. And I'm just going to read a little bit from this. This is 905 Enclaves Becoming Multicentric. This was published Tuesday, March 7, 2013 on page 3 of the news in the Metro paper. It's called Ethnic Enclaves Spread from City into Suburbs. According to Xu Guang Wang, a demographics geographer at Ryerson University, many ethnic enclaves in the 905 have become multicentric, meaning a dominant group has more than one cluster, often surrounding an ethnic mall. An ethnic mall would be like it's that mall up in the Don Mills. It's like a Chinese mall.
Peanut Plaza?
No, it's...
Glen
do
Watford?
you guys know the name of that mall? It's like an Asian mall. Pacific Mall, absolutely. When I used to take mixed martial arts at Sancho Academy, all my sparring partners kept inviting me to Pacific Mall. And when I went there, I felt like I was in China because I didn't recognize any of the stores. All the signs were in Mandarin or Cantonese. I couldn't read the signs. And their friends stared at me in disbelief that I showed up to the mall. But I thought I was going to a mall, right? I didn't realize it was a mall. So I don't know. I guess it was kind of a culture shock. I've just never been to an ethnic mall. But that's an example of one.
Well, at least you can get powdered elephant tusk there.
So you can actually. You can get Tiger Balm and all kinds of stuff. I don't buy that stuff, but some other people do. Often surrounding an ethnic mall or plaza in a single municipality, sharing the space with mixed neighbors. Quote, these businesses may be owned and operated by the Chinese and viewed as ethnic businesses, but they not only target Chinese clients, said Wang. Quote, sometimes because of city planning and zoning, not all areas can get permits for development. People cannot start their own ethnic enclave. They have to add to an existing, added Wang, explaining that the emergence of mixed ethnic hubs in the 905. So you can't start your own. You have to add to an existing one, this guy says. You know? Okay.
Well, we got 2 Chinatowns downtown Toronto.
How come? Okay, so I'm going to cry foul because we only have one Greek town.
Well, you need to get some more Greeks coming over here. Because I like,
No.
No,
No
what?
octopus.
Sharktopus.
No.
Sharkano. Sharkquake.
All right, since I'm pressed for time, I was gonna end the show with Did you guys read the Canadian Immigrant Magazine?
Sure, every day.
Okay.
Not every day.
Okay. This is a really good story by Denise Hansen. It's May 2013. It's called How to Improve Your Cultural Fit. For Ben Yang, an executive director of international education at Georgian College in Barrie, Ontario, nothing comes as a greater compliment than when people assume he was born in Canada. Originally from China, Yang's English proficiency and more than 20 years of living in Canada has amounted to strangers, acquaintances, colleagues, and new friends, assuming he's just another Canadian. But for Yang, being mistaken as Canadian and transitioning and settling into life in Canada is about more than mastering the English language and living in the country for years. For Yang, it's all about cultural fit or fluency. Quote, cultural fit or fluency translates into three things: attitude, knowledge, and skills. He said, coming to Canada, there is a level of discomfort and you feel like a fish out of water. Why? Because your cultural fluency is limited, and there is no knowledge of how to make new friends with people outside one's cultural group. And this is kind of cultural fluency is terribly important, especially when it comes to employment, he adds. Even with perfect English, outreach and networking, which is so important in Canada, to gaining lucrative employment is difficult for newcomers to do who have limited social networks and are unsure of even how to make new friends. Let's say a newcomer has a job interview and an employer is making small talk and asks about the last night's Blue Jay game. Not knowing anything about the Toronto Blue Jays, never mind who they are, immediately there is no likability factor to the applicant, no rapport between the two. Let's look at your resume become so formal, explains Yang. Cultural fluency is not about losing anything. It's about adding more capacity and becoming more well-rounded. I don't think of it as leaving certain things behind. I think of it as a transition. And he ends here. Become more pragmatic, and depending on the setting, try to adapt. Certain behavior patterns will change a little bit. After all, moving to a new country is an adaptation process.
Can I see that magazine?
Absolutely. I thought that was a nice story to end this series on.
You know what, though? Okay, so I mean, even look at the magazine. It's called Canadian Immigrant.
Yeah.
Is that helping or hurting the cause?
If it was called Canadian Citizen or New Canadian Citizen, maybe it would be a better title.
How about just being Canadian?
That's why we have these debates, Sandra, because we've never had this conversation as a people.
Really? That's why we have these debates?
I'm hoping so. I hope we're having this debate because of that reason.
No, but seriously, I mean, we don't have a magazine. I would think that that's almost biased.
Look at the consequences for not having cultural fluency, though. You get enclaves of people.
What's cultural fluency?
Cultural fluency means everyone speaks the same language, shares the same values, and you're able to go anywhere in the country and able to at least communicate with your fellow citizens.
That's not cultural fluency, that's English.
Yeah, but that's the glue that holds society together. That defines our cultural narrative. Language is the definition of Canada's cultural narrative. If you were in Germany, it would be German. If you're in the Middle East, it would be Arabic. Like, wherever you are in the world, language defines cultural identity. It's a major part of it. So, linguistics experts have confirmed this.
That's why they came up with Esperanto.
Is that Spanish
It's Toronto? A new language that everybody can learn. And we'll all be one.
It's the new Toronto.
Okay, Sean. Okay. Sean, thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Hugh, for having me on your show. Thanks, Sandra.
Is this the end?
Of this part, right, Sean?
Yeah, there might be one more, but I have to check and see if the research is necessary.
See if you can find a book, a magazine called Being Canadian. And I'm not talking Molson.
I'm talking Molson.
Okay.
Okay. We got a video.
They could sponsor it, though. They could sponsor a magazine called I Am Canadian. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. Sean, we got this video. What's this video that we're going to watch now?
It's a cartoon. It's like 5 minutes long. It's a sarcastic presentation about, is there such thing as a multicultural identity? And I found it fascinating because it was funny. Like, it had a lot of humor to it. I thought, well, I like to make fun of myself, and these people seem to be making fun of themselves in a... Like, cartoons can get away with anything because they're cartoons.
Well, I hope we're not getting away with just anything. Well, but anyway, let's watch this, and thank you, Sean, for doing this. If people want to get in touch with you, they can by email, right? Yeah, or they can see the other debates we've done on this, Canada's Broken Mosaic, Part 1 and Part 2. Okay.
Sean, why don't you come up with an action plan?
An action plan?
Yeah, and then Harper can implement it. Okay, so here's the cartoon, and thank you, Sean. And we're going to come back in a couple of minutes with Segan as Liquid Lunch continues. We'll be right back.
I guess I'm a communitarian multiculturalist.
What's that?
Communitarian multiculturalism sees the nation as a collection of separate communities that are capable of sharing power and valuing common citizenship. So it emphasizes the politics of difference. There's also liberal, imperial, and feminist multiculturalism.
That's too complicated. I was just wondering how you liked the multicultural policies in Canada.
Did you realize that multiculturalism has been seen as a failure?
I wouldn't agree. We have the Multiculturalism Act and Intercultural Model in Quebec, multicultural content guaranteed in our CRTC, and equal opportunities in the workplace.
Yeah, but we also had an Indian Act, Oriental Exclusion Act, a head tax, and the internment of Japanese citizens. We only want wealthy immigrants, and we need travelers who transit to have visas.
But Canada still has cultural diversity.
Yeah, but the communities generally stick to themselves. Richmond and Richmond Hill have entire populations that totally don't speak English.
That just means they can have their own culture and be Canadian. It's the best of both worlds.
There isn't much integration. For example, there isn't as much political participation, and most minorities don't make as much as their white counterparts.
Are you an integrated Canadian then?
Well, I'm Bengali Canadian.
But you're so westernized.
What does that mean? I still eat Bengali food, and I can speak Bengali, and I'm Muslim.
How can you be a Muslim? You don't wear one of those burqas.
I don't think my parents ever asked me to.
Would you describe yourself as just Canadian then or bicultural?
I thought being multicultural was part of being Canadian.
Yeah, so you have visibility to your minority group.
So when I'm representing my minority group, I'm not Canadian.
No, you are. But you should have your culture represented in the media. It's like black artists and much music.
But the black artists always do similar stuff. I haven't seen Asian music yet. Much music is getting token artists to do what the company wants.
Yeah, but Canada has channels just for minority groups, like the Chinese channels.
Or like the single Iranian character in a movie?
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen Latina women playing and Iranians and Chinese play Japanese.
But the casting's a lot more culturally sensitive now. And it's not just the media. You see people from other cultures in the workplace too.
As in the one Asian secretary in the Multicultural Corporation?
It shows how well integrated the workplace is.
Just because she looks Chinese doesn't mean she has the culture.
So she's adopted Canada's progressive culture. We don't oppress women, we have free speech, and we protect human rights. We're polite and non-confrontational and don't talk about income, politics or religion.
That's the problem. Everyone's so PC and non-confrontational. We end up shoving all the inequities under the rug.
But if everyone was as tolerant as us, we wouldn't have wars around.
That's an ideal. We don't really have an equitable distribution of resources, and minorities don't have much social and political influence.
Everyone has the same health care and can run for office. The system's fair. It's just their choice.
That's a pluralist perspective. You're bracketing off social and cultural differences. For example, a qualified Chinese woman might want to run for office, but her language skills just don't match up.
But that's her problem. She should learn how to communicate to us.
Didn't you say we should have the best of both worlds? That should mean an attempt to understand communities like Greek Town, Koreatown, Chinatown, Polish Town.
We have those. Now I feel excluded. Why do people come to Canada if they stick to their own groups?
Maybe you should go join their groups, and they should be given top managerial positions companies. A lot of professionals aren't able to get licenses to practice in Canada.
That's 'cause they're not as qualified.
I don't think we're really qualified teachers, but we get great packages abroad to teach English.
We're helping make the world more multicultural.
Maybe we should actually learn French as our other official language first.
Who needs French? No one ever speaks it, except in Quebec.